I am Efraim Inbar. I've been a professor for many years of strategic studies and considered an expert on national security in the Middle East. And this is 18 questions for 40 Israeli thinkers from 1840.
So let's begin. As an Israeli and as a Jew, how are you feeling at this moment in Israeli history?
I think that I'm part of a special era of redemption, of having a Jewish state, able to defend ourselves against our enemies, and with the potential of fulfilling the Jewish destiny.
Has that changed for you since October 7th?
It didn't change. We are used to wars. We have fought in the past, and after this war will end, we'll probably have other wars in the future. In this region, we have to live by our sword.
Can you say more about that?
As long as our neighbors are not reconciling themselves to the idea of a Jewish state in their midst, and as long as they try to eradicate the Jewish state, we'll have to fight. And this may take a long time. The learning process of nations is rather slow, and unfortunately, it comes only after much pain.
What has been Israel's greatest success and greatest mistake in its current war against Hamas?
The greatest mistake was, of course, the intelligence failure of not foreseeing that the attack is coming, and its success, which was expected, I think, by specialists, that it recuperated and it went on attack. And we are in the middle of a long job of destroying the Hamas military capabilities and their administrative apparatus.
In the war itself, so I know that you mentioned before with the failure with not the intelligence beforehand and then being able to go into the war. But in the war itself, are there anything specific, a specific success that you think is the greatest, or a specific mistake that you feel is the worst?
It's very difficult to speak about things which maybe should have been done but were not done. We don't know. I'm a bit disappointed by the tempo. I think we are a bit too slow, and I can understand why it happens. There are, of course, outside pressures, particularly from the United States, a lot of involvement. There is also a need to synchronize our attacks on the ground with the need to destroy the tunnels under the ground. This takes time. And of course, there is another constraint, the fact that we know that in certain areas there are hostages, and we don't want to cause inadvertently to their death. We've seen such an incident during the war, and I think that we are cautious, maybe too cautious sometimes. But this is my main criticism, primarily because I'm aware that the world is impatient with such a long war, and they want us to finish it. And I think we should make every effort to finish it as quickly as possible.
How do you think Hamas views the outcome and aftermath of October 7th? Was it a success in their eyes?
The initial success of Hamas was tremendous. They caused a huge number of casualties on our side. They were successful in apprehending prisoners, hostages, and this success was resounding in the whole Arab world. I think it damaged seriously Israel's deterrence. So the initial stage of the war was a great success on part of Hamas. Also, the mere war is a success of Iran because it diverted attention of Israel from the main arena of conflict, which is Iran, to a secondary arena. And Iran indeed scored a huge success.
So I'm actually curious because it's a really timely point from when we're interviewing today. I think is August 6th. And obviously for us in Israel, there's a lot looming over with Iran. Do you think that that spotlight's going to return to Iran and it's going to stay there, or you think it's going to still move around a bit?
I don't understand your question.
Do you think that, you mentioned before that the attention shifted from Iran to Hamas. Do you think that attention is going to shift back to Iran?
Definitely. There is a clear need to shift the attention to Iran, particularly because it's advancing quickly towards a nuclear bomb. And this is an existential threat for Israel, which nobody will take care of it. It's only Israel that will take care of this threat. And therefore, we should try to end the war quickly in order to be able to focus on the main threat to the state of Israel.
What do you look for in deciding which Knesset party to vote for?
Voting behavior is not necessarily rational. And I try to be as rational as possible. Of course, I'm looking for a party that expresses my views on issues of national security, on economics, on social issues. And of course, it's a leadership. So those are the criteria that I try to measure a party by. But it's not easy.
Which is more important for Israel, Judaism or democracy?
We are Jews. Jews is part of us. That is, I don't think that those things should be one against the other. I think we should be able to blend Judaism with democracy. I think that Judaism contains many aspects of democracy. There is no central authority. Everybody can choose his own rabbi. And the king, as described in Deuteronomy, is a weak king, basically, with a lot of constraints, almost a constitutional king. Of course, it's a constitutional king. He has to abide by the Torah. So there is no absolute power according to Jewish tenets. I think that those things can be accommodated, and there are many expressions in Judaism that lead us to a political entity that is not centralized. In every Jewish community in the diaspora, the leadership contains, the rabbinical leadership, the plutocrats with the money, and people that are willing to give their time to the community. So it's a variety of leaderships that come together and lead the community. And this is true also of Israel. I think that democracy is not something that is opposed to Judaism. Actually, Judaism tells you that there is a moral code above us that we should not transgress.
What role should the Israeli government have in religious matters?
We copied to some extent the role that it was played during the Mandate times under the British. Of course, I think some of the legislation should be rooted in Jewish law. We have a rich legal tradition, unparalleled actually in the Western world. Many things can be decided by Jewish law, but I'm not sure that involvement of the government in nominating rabbis, in intervening on many issues is positive. And I think the religious parties, particularly at this time when we are speaking about who is going to enroll in the army, is very counterproductive.
What do you mean by that?
The parties actually defend the dodgers from serving in the military. And I value very much the study of Torah, but not everybody that is part of the Haredi community should be exempt from service. We are during a Milchemet Mitzvah, and everybody should go and join. And hiding behind a Torah page or a Talmud page is immoral.
Should Israel treat its Jewish and non-Jewish citizens the same?
I think, yes. We are a democratic country. Everybody has equal rights. And there is difference between the individual and the collective. I think the collective should be Jewish. It should be clear to everybody that we are a Jewish nation, and our intellectual, spiritual, cultural infrastructure is Jewish. And minorities are to be treated equally. But it is a Jewish country, and they should accept it.
Now that Israel already exists, what's the purpose of Zionism?
Zionism is the movement for the revival of the Jewish people, to build a just society, to build a society that is full of Judaism. We are not there yet. I think there is still a lot of things to do. Zionism as such has been an extremely successful national movement to establish a state, to bring millions of Jews to their homeland, to build a flourishing economy, to build a military that is successful in defending the country from many enemies. We are a great success story, but it's not over.
Is opposing Zionism inherently anti-Semitic?
I'm not sure what you mean by anti-Semitic, but opposing Zionism basically says the Jews are not a nation and not entitled to self-determination. Call it racism, call it whatever you want. I think every nation basically has a right for self-determination. I don't think that this should be denied to the Jewish people. Basically, they are saying you are not a people, you are just a religion, not understanding or not willing to accept the nature of the Jewish people, that there is such a thing as Jewish people. And they, like other people, are entitled to have a state, are entitled to determine that Jerusalem is their capital. And if they don't accept it, they are my enemies. I don't care how you call them.
It's interesting to hear your explanation. It's making me think, I'm wondering, do you support a two-state solution in that explanation of the people's right to nationality or national determination?
I think that we've seen over the years a clear emergence of a group of Arabs that their self-declared identity is Palestinian. And in principle, I don't deny their right to have their own political entity. The problem is that the Palestinian national movement is not willing to accept, basically, a Jewish state next to it. We've seen the polls after October 7, where 70-80% of the Palestinian population in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, or in Gaza, support Hamas activities. We've seen for years, after Oslo, the Palestinian education system, which instills antisemitic messages that denies the right of the Jews to have a state. So in principle, I don't mind a Palestinian entity that is ready to live peacefully next to us. Unfortunately, this is not the case, and we'll have to fight them and to cause them pain until they learn that they have to change.
It's interesting. I know you've written a few different books, specifically in that time period of Oslo and before and afterward. At the time, did you expect things to take the course that they did of history?
I've been always suspicious of the Palestinian national movement. And after a short while, I realized that they are not sincere. And basically, the Palestinian national movement saw Oslo, acquired a territorial base next to Israel in order to continue their struggle against the state of Israel.
Can you just very quickly say what Oslo is for people who may not be familiar?
The Oslo agreements, which were signed in 1993, basically envisioned a certain development in which the basis for it was the transfer of the cities in Judea and Samaria, which are heavily populated by the Arabs, to the PLO. And Rabin at that time emphasized that he wanted a Palestinian entity, Palestinian authority, with a good enough police force to be able to prevent terrorism. In my understanding of what Rabin wanted, and I wrote a book on Rabin, I think that I understand Rabin, the deal was not so much territories for peace, but territories for security. And in that respect, the Palestinian Authority failed miserably, because it continued to be a base for terrorism against Israel until this very day.
Is the IDF the world's most moral army?
There is no clear measurement, who is more moral, who is less moral. I've been a combat soldier for many years. I always believed in what Israeli military says, the purity of arms. I tried to behave in such a way in the wars I participated and in many other warlike activities. I think that the Israeli army makes more efforts than any other army to minimize the amount of collateral damage, of civilian casualties. I talked to American lawyers in the US Army, and some of them said to me, "You are crazy, that's no way to conduct a war." And we still do it, what's happening in Gaza, we tell the civilians there, move from this area to another area because this area is going to be bombed. Actually denying ourselves the element of surprise, which is important. And we send flyers, we make telephone calls, we speak to them in Arabic, so they'll understand. So I think we are doing huge efforts. And for part of the world, this is not enough. But I think we should understand that you cannot conduct a war deluxe. War is war. War is hell, as General Sherman said during the Civil War in the United States. And unfortunately, there are also a lot of civilians. In Gaza in particular, it's very difficult to differentiate between civilians and militants, because many Gazans are hiding in their homes weapons and explosives. And so I think we conduct the war in such a way, not because of the international criticism, but because we want to be able to look into the mirror next day and say to ourselves, I was okay.
If you were making the case for Israel, where would you begin?
I'm here. I'm here, and I'm going to stay here. And if somebody doesn't like it, he has to fight me. Simple. I don't have to explain why I'm here.
Can you say more about that?
I'm a Jew. I think that's my country. Most Jews believe that this is our country. Many Gentiles believe this is our country. And if somebody has a problem with it, he has to try to change the reality, and it can be done only by force. We are here to stay.
Can questioning the actions of Israel's government and army, even in the context of this current war, be considered a valid form of love and patriotism?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Which part of it?
All
of it.
What, military, civil military relations? Or
no,
what?
Can questioning, if people questioning the actions of Israel's government and army be considered a valid form of love and patriotism?
Everybody, can criticize and question what we are doing. Israelis do this all the time. So, of course, there are others. The others, are relying on Haaretz for questioning Israel. This is something that I have no problem with. If the problem is that they are not always to listen to the explanations. But if they question, fine, you cannot please everybody in this world.
Can you say more about that? Any particular examples that stand out to you?
Many people simply don't understand what's happening in the Middle East, particularly, Westerners.
What do they misunderstand?
We live in a tough neighborhood. And in a tough neighborhood, often you have to behave like a bully in order to gain respect, in order to acquire deterrence. You have to use force. In many Western quarters, use of force is anachronistic, is non-civilized. Well, it may be true, but here it is very timely. And that's the way to survive. So I have no problem that Israel uses force, and I think it doesn't use enough. We have conducted for many years a policy of containment, which was partly responsible for the October 7 attack.
Can you explain what containment is for people who aren't familiar?
Yeah, containment is after you're attacked, you feel that you do not to escalate. Escalation became a dirty word, and you don't want to respond in order to have quiet afterwards, hoping that the other side understands that only a moderate response is appropriate. And but this is construed in the Middle East as weakness. It also gives time to the other side to build its forces. The tunnels in Gaza are a result of our inactivity for so many years. We should have acted much earlier in order to destroy Hamas capabilities. But we wanted quiet, we didn't want casualties, we didn't want the economy to be hurt. So there are many good reasons for doing nothing or not doing enough. Good reason, I would say. But the result is that you lose deterrence, you allow the enemy serious build-up, and actually the world gets used. The Jews are being attacked, and you don't do much about it, which is terrible.
Can you talk more? What do you think Israel should have done, and when do you think they should have done it?
I think that we should have mowed the grass. Basically, quite often going into Gaza to debilitate their military capabilities and go home. In order to reduce the threat they are constituting to Israel. And this, unfortunately, has not been done. I think the government was too passive, and this is a policy actually we are implementing more or less in Judea and Samaria. We go once in a while, find the bad guys, kill them or bring them into custody, and reduce their capabilities to harm Israel. This should have been done in Gaza as well. We should not forget that in year 2002, the West Bank cities, Arab cities, were conquered by Israel, cleaned of terrorism, and since then we mow the grass all the time. This type of treatment was not part of Gaza, and we pay the consequences.
Why do you think that wasn't part of the treatment?
Because that strategy, and I do not disagree with the strategy, was to have a weak Hamas in order to splinter the Palestinian national movement between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, PLO. And this was a good strategy, but it was not implemented. Basically, Hamas, as we all know now, is not weak, was not weak. So we have not weakened enough Hamas in order to preserve the results of this strategy.
What do you think is the most legitimate criticism leveled against Israel today?
Listen, tell me the criticism. I'll tell you if it's legitimate or not.
Well, you tell me, from what you hear, is there anything that you hear that you think that's the most legitimate thing that I've heard against Israel?
I think that we are behaving in a moral way. I think that making decisions in the Israeli environment is not easy. There is a lot of uncertainty. And even if the wrong decisions have been made, I think there is, in most cases, an explanation, not necessarily a good one. I want to quote a professor of mine, Professor Yechezkel Dror, who said that many times output of government, if it's not well understood, is basically a result of stupidity. And we also have some stupid people in our midst who make mistakes, and we pay for them.
Do you think peace between Israelis and Palestinians will happen within your lifetime?
Oh, I'm old. No, I don't think so. I have white hair, and no, I don't think, even if I live until 120, I'm not sure I want it. No, I don't think I'll see it. Changes in the behavior of collectives take time. You see, the Germans had to lose 2 world wars in order to change and to be less belligerent. The Japanese suffered 2 atomic bombs, and they became pacifists for a while until China resurges. The Palestinians, and I admit, have great ability for suffering, for absorbing pain, and probably we didn't exact enough pain from the Palestinians in order to change, and but history goes on, so we'll see what happens. Wars are not won only by who has more force and who can kill more people, but also by the ability to sustain pain, to bear the costs of conflict. For the time being, the Israeli society has demonstrated great ability to sustain pain. We go to wars, mothers send their children to the military, knowing well that there is a danger. After October 7th, the Israeli society performed admirably. It's not clear what will happen in the future.
Can you talk more about what's preventing it, in your view?
What is preventing what?
Peace.
Peace?
Yeah.
They don't want peace. They want to kill us. Simply.
Can you talk more about that? You mentioned you were talking a little about history and just more generally about national security and whatnot. I'm curious if you can elaborate a little bit more.
As long as the Palestinians have not given the hope of destroying the Jewish state, and you can see it, in the refugee camps, which are nourished by UNRWA. Some families have a key, and they show the key, and they say, "I want to go back to the place, my forefathers lived." And I understand the feeling. The Zionist movement is exactly about that. And, we came back after 2,000 years. We didn't kill any people that were living here. This was not the Zionist policy. But this is the Palestinian policy. Now, it may change in the future. So as long as they are willing to fight for going back to where their grandfather, great-grandfather was, there's not going to be peace. It's simple.
What should happen with Gaza and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict after the war?
was asked what will be, what I suggest the day after. And basically I think the day after will not be that different from the day before. The Gazans, the people of Gaza, should decide their future. And I'm very much afraid that if they are asked what is their future, they'll say, Hamas is our future. So this is not a very optimistic thought. So this is what will happen in Gaza. I don't think Israel can occupy Gaza and re-educate the Palestinians. We are not good at political engineering. The Americans are not good at political engineering. They invested huge amounts of blood and treasure in Iraq to change Iraq. They didn't change Iraq. They didn't change Afghanistan. This region is very much resilient to foreign intervention because of a variety of reasons. And it is not like Germany or Japan, in which the Americans, conquered, stayed for a while, and re-educated the people. Here it's not going to work anytime soon.
I have two questions. I'll start with two follow-ups on that. One is, what would you say is different about the situation with Germany and Japan that you don't think it would be relevant to this situation?
Both countries, Germany as well as Japan, were very advanced economically, technologically. They were at a different stage of development with, and their political culture had some elements of Western political tradition. This is missing in the region. So therefore it's not going to succeed. And look at the Arab Spring. I remember I was in San Francisco at the time of the Arab Spring. It's the beginning, and everybody was in hubris. Oh, the Middle East is going to change. And I was looking at my American colleagues.
The Arab Spring, for people who aren't familiar, in 2011 when there was the big wave.
In 2011 there was a huge attempt by the masses to change the authoritarian system. And I was looking at that time I was at an American university on the West Coast, and I told them, hey, you don't get it. It's not going to change. And they were looking at me, and some of them said, you are a racist. But it didn't change. Not because I was a racist, but because, Europe became democratic after a few centuries of political development. This is not here. It's not so. It's different. People are not every people is the same. I remember I had a big argument with Natan Sharansky. Sharansky wrote a famous book that even President Bush quoted before going into Iraq. And he believes that everybody wants liberty, freedom. And I told him, it ain't so. People want stability, want to send their kids to school and to make a living and, a quiet life. Not everybody is political. Most people don't care about politics. And most people don't fight for, liberty, democracy. So, and this is definitely true here.
And so you think that is the case with Palestinians in Gaza, or that's not the case in your
They
opinion?
are in favor of Hamas. Hamas is an Islamist radical organization. And all of them want to kill Jews. So this is not a good beginning for democracy.
So what do you think Israel should do with Gaza after the war? That was my other follow-up to the question. You spoke a little bit about what you think Gaza will be like after the war. I'm curious what you would recommend or what you think Israel should do after the war.
I don't know what will be in Gaza after the war. I think we should disengage and mow the grass. What is important for us in Gaza is freedom of military action. And whenever, like in the West Bank, whenever there is a threat, we should go in and mow the grass, kill the bad guys, and go back. Don't try to win their hearts and minds. All this insurgency theories is nonsense in most countries. And I know this goes against American thinking. I'm in favor of punitive expeditions, Roman punitive expeditions. This is what works.
Do you think Israel is properly handling the Iranian threat?
No. We should have attacked a long time ago. No, I think we missed opportunities. We expect, or some people expect, that the Americans will do the job for us, and this is an illusion. We should take care of the threat as quickly as possible. We should invest in preparing the military option. And we waited for too long. So, and what we see nowadays is partly the result of our unwillingness to face the bitter truth that nobody is going to do the job for us.
Where do you identify on Israel's political and religious spectrum? And do you have any friends on the quote-unquote other side?
What do you think? Where am I politically?
I'll tell you my guess after you.
Obviously, I am, right of center, and I'm identified as such. But I believe that we should have a civil discourse with people that disagree. I have friends on the other side, and I can talk to them. We can discuss things, not agree, but we are fighting in the same army.
Where do you identify on the religious spectrum? On the religious spectrum, where do you identify?
I'm a liberal Orthodox.
And so for our last question,
okay.
There were 18. There were just a lot of follow-ups to dive a little bit deeper. This is not false advertisement. Do you have more hope or fear for Israel and the Jewish people?
It's a difficult question. First of all, I believe it is in our hands. Our future is in our hands and depends much upon our own behavior. We are an extremely creative and smart people. Everybody knows it. We are adored and hated because of that. And I was very hopeful until the last year. But till, in the last year, we've seen self-destructive impulses within the Israeli society during the debate over the legal reform. And those expressions, we see them today. It's not over. And this is a pity because we are ahead of Tisha B'Av next week. And we should remember that if we don't behave properly, bad things can happen to us. So I'm hopeful and fearful as well. So there are days I'm more optimistic, there are days I am less optimistic. Generally, I don't leave the country. I'm here to stay.
And today, are you more optimistic or less optimistic?
Listen, everywhere you see Jews are, during the war, Jews go and fight. The Jews, the state failed, but the civil society, went and provided all the services to the people in the rear, to the soldiers. So there was a huge mobilization of the Israeli people to do the right things. So this gives me hope. At the same time, we have demonstrations on the left, on the right, or violations of law. We have sycarics. So it's the zealots of the second temple. So this is a problem.
Okay, great. Well, Efraim Inbar, those were our 18 questions. Thank you so much for your time.
You are welcome.
Anything that I didn't ask that you wish I asked?
I don't know.
Maybe how you're doing.
Huh?
Maybe I should have asked how you're doing.
I'm fine.